and welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 528, being recorded on January 11, 2019. I'm your host, Sebastian Peak.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Jim Tannis.
And we have a lot to talk about. This is our annual CES recap show. But, of course, it couldn't be just CES recap. We also have some reviews to get to. There was a rather big graphics card release. And I will say right off the bat, not expected. Kind of short notice for everybody on the new graphics card coming out. Not just from NVIDIA, but also, of course, we'll get to some AMD news shortly. But we can't ignore the fact that a brand new member of the RTX family is with us. The new arrival is the RTX 2060. And before we get into performance numbers, I just want to say that based on early feedback and just kind of like my own impressions of this card, if you've read the review at PCPer.com, you already know NVIDIA is really kind of targeting 1440 performance with this card. It's kind of your 1080 Ultra or 1440 normal high settings kind of graphics solution. So not what you'd expect from an XX60 product. Like going back to the 1060, this thing has 2x the performance of a 1060. It has significantly more performance than I would have expected from the name. And the price kind of matches the performance. So it's a little bit more expensive than you'd think of for a mainstream 1080p card at $349 MSRP. And the performance is higher than you would necessarily expect from a mainstream card. So if they were to name these cards based on resolution, this would be the RTX 1440, and up to the 2080 Ti, those would be like the RTX 4K cards. So for those of you waiting for a 1080p gaming solution in the RTX family, that will probably have to wait for what I would assume would be like a 2050 Ti if it follows the naming convention of previous generations. But if we look over the numbers in the review, pretty much across the board, this is providing performance that is somewhere in between a 1070 and a 1080. There are times where this will perform neck and neck with a 1080 or even edge it out, depending on what you're doing, what the graphics, like the resolution detail settings are. And there are times where it's sandwiched right neatly in between them or kind of matching a 1070, but you're getting last year's like high-end performance at this year's like, $350 price point, which is impressive. But the most impressive thing to me is just how far ahead this is of the 1066 gigabyte card. This feels like almost like a Ti. Like they haven't done a Ti in a couple generations now for the 60s. I don't think there was was there even a 960 Ti? There wasn't a 1060 Ti. Because they differentiated the 1060 with the 6 gig and the 3 gig version, which had slightly different performance in addition to the memory disparity, but certainly very performant. And I couldn't really fault the MSRP. I know that there was disappointment from people looking for that mainstream price and performance, but I don't know. What do you guys think as far as $349 based on the benchmarks that we've seen so far? And I will say I haven't done 1440p. I got full HD and UHD done before I had to get on a plane for CES. I'm going to be revisiting it on the bench behind me at 1440 and get some other tests done. But just to get like GPU bound, I went UHD instead of kind of meeting in the middle of 1440 before I left, but that will be added. I'm going to follow this up with a part 2, but again, like the performance that we've seen so far at this price, what do you think?
I think it's fair. I mean, they're looking at the market and they've got something that is okay. I mean, it's not blowing anybody's hair back. Okay, maybe mine, but it's you kind of get what you pay for in there. I think that a $299 would be a much more interesting price, especially since in many ways it's as fast as a 1070 and sometime approaches the 1070 Ti. But you've got the DLSS option. You've got the ability to run RTX, sometimes poorly, from what we've seen. But it's kind of uninspiring, but it's reasonable. I hate to be as vanilla as that, but
I hear you. Like when I was testing it, I was thinking like you always look for that story. We want to write interesting stories and we like interesting products. And this one seems to so neatly fit into the performance envelope that its price suggests that it almost, I guess it would be, like you said, it'd be more compelling if it was $299. We'd be like raving about its performance for that price level. But at $349, it seems that they've priced it very fairly. At least we're not having the conversation that this is too expensive. Like there is unhappiness at the high end with $699 being the base price of the RTX 2080. I think the 2070 is at $599. And then obviously, like what you can actually find them for at retail is a little bit different. If you're finding those cards at that price, I've seen at least a couple examples of each on Newegg in the last couple of days. And of course, there are alternates, different board partners that have versions that are currently being sold above MSRP. So you're seeing well over $700, even approaching $800 for some of the 2080s out there. But to get as close to the performance of a 2070 even as you can get with a 2060, because essentially this is the same GPU as a 2070. It is a modified version, a so-called cut-down version of a 2070.
It's what, the TU-106?
Yes. So it has 1920 CUDA cores. You have 6 gigabytes of memory, and you have less memory bandwidth. I believe it's 336 gigabytes or a gigabit per second memory bandwidth.
Yeah, but it's not a full 256-bit bus. It's 192-bit and 6 gigs, I think. Correct?
Well, this is using GDDR. Yeah, this is using GDDR6 memory. Yeah. So yeah, it's the 192-bit memory bus, but it's 336.1 gigabytes per second instead of 448 with the 2070. And actually, in our benchmark results, the 2070, just as a little footnote, is the only RTX card that I had on hand to test that was not a Founders Edition. And actually, the Founders Edition cards, even though it's kind of the sort of reference card, has a higher boost clock than a normal like board partner base card would have. So the performance of a reference 2070, like a Founders Edition 2070, would actually be a little bit higher than what we saw in those charts. So the closeness that you got between the RTX 2060 and the 2070 would be a little reduced. There'd be more of a gap at Founders Edition speeds. But this card, that one aspect that I didn't get to, that I will be getting to, is overclocking. And this card is said to be a pretty good overclocker. So we'll see how close I can get to a 2070 at $349. It's a pretty interesting story when I get to that.
What do you think about the memory, though? And this is something that AMD highlighted, and what we'll talk about later with the Radeon 7 is at 6 gigabytes, a lot of games pushing 1440p. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be playing the latest games at 4K on this card, but at 1440p, there are some games that are going to be pushing up against that memory limit.
Yeah, and a couple of the games in the benchmarks that I ran are very memory intensive. So that's a valid point. I mean, I was kind of playing around with memory settings to make sure I wasn't memory constrained with some of the results. And because obviously the 1060 6 gig and this 2060 are both limited to 6 gigabytes. Everything else I tested was 8, I believe, 8 or 11. So it's that. I mean, I think that's probably one of the reasons they do target 1440 so specifically in their literature about this card, and it being like geared mainly towards like an ultimate kind of 1080 card that offers great performance at 1440, I think is how they put it. Like not specifically saying this is your 1440p card. I think they'd rather somebody buy a 2070 if they're doing like ultra gaming on at 1440. So, yeah, but part of the story also is going to be not just ray tracing, because I don't think you'd necessarily want to be running ray tracing on the tensor cores of the 2060. They had a demo running, their internal demo running on this card at their suite, but the frame rate wasn't as high unless you go DLSS, and that is not enabled yet in like the Port Royal benchmark in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Once things actually start taking advantage of DLSS, and for those who don't know, that is, they haven't gone into a lot of detail about it. It's dynamic, and not dynamic. It is deep learning super sampling. So it dynamically analyzes frames and comes up with a more intelligent anti-aliasing with.
So it's kind of like AI super
screen. Yeah,
AI
yes.
super sampling.
Yes. So instead of like TAA where it's doing the whole thing, it says, okay, well, this is the edge of something. This is like it's doing object recognition, and then it's only smoothing the surfaces that it really needs to, and it's using fewer samples. So the performance difference when we were looking at Port Royal side by side, running DLSS versus ray tracing, it was a huge boost in frame rate to go DLSS.
Well,
and
I think
then,
you know what they're actually doing there.
Yeah.
When you enable DLSS like that, I believe it is natively rendering at a much lower resolution, and then using DLSS, I mean they're resampling everything to a higher resolution. So you're running at 1440p, right? But it's actually internally running at a much lower resolution through DLSS, and so
which would perfectly explain that would explain the higher frame rate exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
But you know what? Side by side, it looks great, and in fact, to the naked eye, especially after it was pointed out, like look at the edges of things, and suddenly it's like actually, instead of having that sort of glossy, shiny look, it suddenly had like a little bit more of a sharp, not like it wasn't anti-aliased at all, but sharp corners were sharp. It wasn't that everything on the screen was slightly blurred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't remember the exact numbers. I think it was the side-by-side demo they had at their CES suite was with DLSS off, it was high 20s, low 30s.
Yeah.
With DLSS on, it was in the mid 50s. And you're right, like it subjectively looked better. Just standing there looking at them both, the DLSS side looked better and had the higher frame rate. Whether we can get that in and start testing it and making sure that they're not tricking us. But even if they are, quote, tricking us,
it still looks good.
Yeah, if it looks good, then it looks good. And if, there might not be a huge disadvantage there for most applications.
I will say, edges of objects and smoothness aside, the benefit of the reflections, like the water effects they were showing, the reflectivity off of like chrome, the round environments that they're able to do, all of that stuff that you can do with ray tracing, they're still doing with DLSS at higher frame rates. And if you have a card, especially like this 2060, that you just would not want to enable ray tracing on necessarily at higher resolutions, if it can do it, and then the higher end cards are doing it at a much higher frame rate, then suddenly this becomes a lot more interesting and less of a like proof of concept thing, and suddenly like, oh, this is actually a viable option to enable in games, and more reason for games to support it before like next gen hardware really makes it accessible with better performance. So,
something in my to watch. Opinion, RTX stuff, I mean, the actual ray tracing is not as interesting as what they're doing with DLSS in terms of just being able to optimize performance across all your stuff. It's actually kind of impressive that DLS is able to work as it does. And so, I am interested to be able to do more testing on that and see, some of your results as well. Yeah. And, that's a cool technology. I remember back in like 2003 or something, I went to NVIDIA's FX launch, and I asked a question of Jensen Huang. I was like, now that you've got this, hugely programmable product for the time, when are you going to implement like a shader-based AA? And he's like, shader-based AA.
Wait, we have you to thank for this?
No, I think
you make a note.
Call a lawyer immediately.
Yeah, no. I think
any witnesses to this, Josh?
Well, only a room full of 200 people watching the thing when I was able to take a microphone and ask him.
I see.
But yeah, I don't know. Well, I doubt I was the
catalyst.
No, I definitely was not, because there were a lot of very, very smart people working at NVIDIA, and this was obviously something that they had thought of well before me when, looking at how you could apply different versions. And TSAA, is that the one? I can't remember.
Temporal aliasing is what they were, they like to compare it against.
Yeah. So that's essentially a shader-based AA. So anyhow, moving along.
Yeah, I mean,
moving along.
The thing about all of this too is that this is so early still. I mean, there are so few things that take advantage of this that we can really put into a practical application. Like Sebastian and I being at CES last week, and we saw from NVIDIA itself, we saw from their partners, we saw from the laptop makers who are putting RTX mobile. If I see another Battlefield 5 demo, I'm going to snap. Like, we need to get more stuff out there to truly see. They've really optimized it. It looks great. Battlefield 5 looks awesome. RTX, the implementation there is great, but we've got to see more stuff still. So it's still early.
But Jim, look at the side of the car. Look at the fire.
Yes.
Reflected in the side of the car.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We've all seen it a lot. And of course we're insiders, so we're looking at this a lot more than the average person. But yeah, it's time for more games, more demos, more benchmarks. And speaking of benchmarks, this is not a real segue. The Corsair released a trio of gaming mice, which Jim had the privilege of going through, along with a very nice mouse pad, as I see in this photo here.
Yeah, so Corsair had their event at CES. I think it was on Monday, and they announced these products. We had gotten early review samples of them. It's an update to two of their product lines, as well as the introduction of a new product in their mice category. And it's the updated products are they're nice updates. They're nothing revolutionary or anything. It's the M65 RGB Elite, and then so that's their sort of pro gamer mouse. It's got the sniper button on the thumb, so that you can have one DPI for regular movement. You press that button, and it lowers the DPI for more precise movement. And that's actually they target it towards, like, if you're in a sniper mode and you want to have precision, but you can use that for productivity applications. Like I use it in Photoshop when I want to very selectively crop something or it selects a few pixels. I can slow down the precision or increase the precision by lowering the DPI on demand. So
do you call it, when you're working in Photoshop, do you call it sniping?
I do, and I go pew pew.
Yeah.
So it's handy there. It's nice. They upgraded the PixArt sensors in it. So the M65 RGB Elite goes to 18,000 DPI. It's going to be $59.99 when it launches later this month. The other update is their Iron Claw, which is a mouse that has a much bigger. Actually, I think I've got it right here. It's just a bigger mouse. So it's got for palm grippers, they say. So if you've got a big hand, you want a lot of support in the arch of your hand, you can go with something like this. It's pretty lightweight, nice big scroll wheel, and that's also got the 18,000 DPI PixArt sensor in it.
So that would be really comfortable for Rachmaninoff, right?
Yes, it would,
with his big hands.
Yep.
Yeah,
his big hands, and that's going to be $59.99 as well. And then the more interesting aspect of all of this is the Harpoon RGB wireless. This is their new,
which is interesting because that's their low cost.
It's lower cost
of the trio. Yeah.
So it's not as high performance. It's a 10,000 DPI sensor, but it's still got selectable DPI modes, and it's got side buttons and RGB. 99 grams on the weight. And the difference now is this introduces their Slipstream technology, which is what they're calling their new wireless technology that they're going to be using for all of their wireless peripherals eventually. This is their first product, but eventually they're going to use it for headsets, keyboards, and they didn't directly say it, but it's something similar to Logitech's Lightspeed technology. So it's ultra low latency for wireless. That's their goal, is to make sure that you can have a wireless experience without requiring the wire. And they don't have all the details. They didn't give us many details at all. But basically what it's doing is intelligent channel hopping. So it's going to automatically and dynamically switch between wireless channels as needed to make sure that you've always got the fast lane to the receiver. In this particular case, it comes with a receiver for that Slipstream, but you can also use it in Bluetooth mode and or wired mode. So you've got 3 choices there for how you want to use this mouse, and it's $50. So a nice lightweight RGB mouse. So nothing, Slipstream is interesting. We'll have to see how it pans out. We need to see it introduced in more products. They said that it'll work with up to 3 products. So you can have one Slipstream receiver and connect up to 3 devices, keyboards, headsets, and mice. So when those all get into the market, I think that'll be something worth revisiting to see how it works. As for now, it's a nice little mouse, very low latency, comfortable. So something to check out there.
Yes,
so that's the,
yes.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say standard Bluetooth has so much latency inherent in it, and the way that the actual Bluetooth standard is written, like what they were talking about, I thought the Slipstream was the most interesting thing about the whole presentation, because they were talking about basically writing a new stack, like starting over again and using 2.4 gigahertz and just a completely new way of sort of intelligently creating the lowest latency connection that they can, which I immediately am thinking about a headset. Like, and obviously in the future we might possibly see this with like audio, and that would be great, because unless you do something like get in a headset that specifically supports like aptX low latency, and then get a aptX low latency compatible dongle to hook up to your computer, and this, if it's being sold together in one package where the adapter that you get when you plug it in gives you that ultra low latency, so you don't have that lip sync issue when you're watching video and that sort of thing, that's going to be a very good change.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll keep an eye out for when they release more products with that technology, and we'll see how it all works together.
Okay, now with those reviews out of the way, let's talk about CES.
Yay.
And let's just get to it. Let's talk about the AMD keynote. And, it took until the end to get everything. And we didn't really get absolute Josh.
Now, let me restate the obvious here. They didn't cover everything until the end.
Well, there was like
then they covered it all.
It was a one more thing moment. Like, it was Lisa Su's like Steve Jobs moment on stage, where she got to tease like Ryzen desktop. But the rumors and things leading up to this were it was all gonna, like, I was actually sitting here at the airport making charts based on the leaks and like, okay, here's the different Ryzen SKUs and here's what the desktop picture is going to look like. And of course, we got a preview of 3rd gen Ryzen, but the headliner was Radeon 7. I'm sure you were following along, Josh.
Yeah. I I didn't know what to expect. I figured that we would see a little bit of the Ryzen 3000 series. But, she kind of built up, talked about Epic 2. And then, the Radeon 7. That was the surprise. There had been some people who had speculated that Navi wasn't going as well as it should, and so that they were going to go ahead and take the 7 nanometer Vega, which initially they had only said it's going to go into high end performance, machine learning type stuff, institution, what the Fire Pro, what is it anymore? Is it still Fire Pro? I can't remember. My brain is turned to mush after I turned 40.
Well, there's Vega Frontier edition.
Yeah, but that was the content creation kind of.
And they were emphasizing content creation a lot with this too.
Yeah,
like content creation and gaming, and it's kind of like you're all in one solution if you're doing compute, content creation, and gaming.
Yeah,
is how
so
they're
it
kind of
seems
selling
like
this card.
The Vega 7 nanometer. Obviously it's made on 7 nanometer, but they've also apparently done some more optimizations. They haven't really added anything spectacular to it. It's still, basically Vega, but performance looks good. It's got 16 gigs of HBM memory running at 1 terabyte per second of throughput, which I think that at what did they say at 1600p, it's can read the entire frame buffer, each frame at 60 frames per second.
Oh.
So it's some serious throughput on there. It's going to be low latency, and they didn't talk about power. Obviously, we don't know how TSMC 7 nanometers running. We don't know how this Vega 7 nanometer is running. Is it going to be another 250 plus watt, card? There were things about it that were surprising. The 16 gigs was surprising. That they were even putting it out was a shock. There are going to be other people out there saying, well, I knew that they do that, blah. But they had told us 6 months ago there wouldn't be a consumer-facing Vega 7 nanometer car. They're expecting Navi to be out here. $699. What do you think of the price point?
Well, I mean, I think that when you consider that it has 16 gigabytes of HBM2, that it wasn't going to be cheap. That's not inexpensive. It's like you said, it's extremely high bandwidth memory. The JEDEC standard only just got updated recently to even allow stacks as dense as what they're doing to go up to 16 gigs, which is double what they could previously even do with HBM2. So,
well, no, it was the same, because if you think about the original Vega 14 nanometer, it had 2 stacks of HBM2, and it was 8 gigs.
Oh, it's okay. So you're talking about like single versus multiple packages for the memory capacity.
Well, this one has 4, and so it's the previous was 512-bit wide. Wait, no. How does that all go? Anyway, it's double what the previous Vega was, and those had 2 chips, and this is now 4 chips. So it didn't increase the stack and didn't increase the speed, but you added double the amount there, and
Gotcha.
had the full 1024 bus width. Anyway,
yeah, I just like the standards now allow for
4,000.
The standards now allow for up to 24 gigabytes, which is the old limitation was 8, but we're talking about a single stack. So yeah, 2. I mean, I don't know how crazy the power draw might be if it's just using 2 8-pin connectors. Like an RTX 2080 is using a 8-pin and a 6-pin, and
2 8-pins is it's 300 watts.
Yeah,
that it can handle.
I mean, I'm sure it's a pretty serious looking card. I mean, the big 3-fan cooler. I imagine that it's probably going to consume a little bit of power, but it's the question is going to be at $699 for just a pure gamer, I guess. If all you're doing, if you're not loyal to one side or the other, you're just objective, you have $700 to spend somehow on a video card, and you don't have a brand preference, you go to Newegg, and both of these are sitting there, and you have an RTX 2080, so then it's advertising, well, tensor cores and ray tracing, and then on the other hand, you have the Radeon 7 sitting at the same price, which is giving you significantly more memory, and you're not getting CUDA cores, but it depends on what applications you use. Like, obviously, AMD is all in on OpenCL compute. So I guess it depends on what your needs are. If your particular needs are more of like what they're talking about with content creation, if you're doing like something that uses AMD's existing compute technologies, and then you're getting something that is significantly faster than last generation's Vega with a lot more memory available to you, then that will tip the scales, I think, in the favor of the Radeon 7. But for just a pure gamer, it is a little bit harder argument to make. And internally, I know that some more stuff since we reported this have come out. You can look at slides on performance that AMD's released, which is performance relative to previous generation. They're not showing benchmarks against the competition or anything like that at this point. So that may or may not be suggestive of how it does perform next to the RTX 2080, and not even getting into inflammatory remarks by certain CEOs of high-profile graphics companies and their opinions of their competitors' technologies. But both CEOs have been speaking to the media recently, let's put it that way, and offering their own thoughts about the viability of their own graphics products. So, but hey, you know what? They also talked about Ryzen CPUs. And whether or not AMD is neck and neck with NVIDIA yet, and they're certainly catching up fast on graphics. They are really, really sticking it to Intel in the last couple of years on just incredible price performance and just cores galore. So the idea of, 7-nanometer Ryzen on basically an EPYC package with chiplets that offer a sort of modular approach to the CPU's construction and the potential for additional cores than just the 8 cores shown on stage. Very interesting. And I'm sure you have some thoughts about this, Josh.
Maybe one or two. When we first saw EPYC 2 last year and they showed off the bare chip and you saw all the chiplets there, mine just kind of starts racing. You start thinking there's a ton of things that they can do here, and there's a lot of flexibility. And if they take all the I/O off of there, I/O is typically the kind of the lowest performing in terms of transistor performance. Eats a little bit more power. It's typically clocked a little bit lower. And so they're taking all that off, and they're really focusing on these Ryzen chips. And this is kind of untied their hands a little bit. So they could really put a lot of engineering into each design. And instead of having to, synthesize this design across 15 different SKUs that are going to go from, the low-end mobile up to the high-end, EPYC 2, they've really focused on these Ryzen chips that'll be on desktop and then, all go all the way to the server. I think their mobile strategy is a little different, but we don't know anything really, distinct about what Zen 2 is going to bring to the mobile. But at least in terms of, being able to get an APU out for the desktop that uses one Ryzen chip, and then you can have the GPU, a new Vega, or if they, go Navi, which I doubt they will at this first generation, but you can, plop another chip on there and you've got this one big IO that handles all of the memory. And, it's going to have the basic, SATA ports and PCI Express. It's going to be PCIe 4.0.
Yeah. First to market with 4.0 is what they were saying.
Yeah, for desktop. I mean, there are server products out there that are, kind of more specialty and ARM-based and stuff that's 4.0. But this will be the first desktop that will utilize that. And a lot of X470 boards probably will be 4.0 compliant, that you put a Ryzen 3000 series chip in, or whatever they're going to call it, and you've suddenly got PCIe 4.0. And that's going to be interesting because didn't you guys just look at the new NVMe controller that utilizes PCIe 4.0, and you're getting 4 terabytes per second, or no, not sorry,
gigabytes,
4 gigabytes per second of
just 4 gigabytes,
bandwidth.
Josh.
Yeah, it's nothing. So it's really cool that they're getting a 7-nanometer part. It's coming out a little bit later, and I think they wanted to. EPYC 2 was initially going to be a Q1 product, a couple of years ago when they announced it. Now that's midsummer. The desktop stuff's going to be midsummer, and this is not surprising. We knew desktop was going to be later, but we didn't expect server to be that much later. But they're still going to be in Intel to, kind of a 7-nanometer / 10-nanometer type product. They've improved IPC. It sounds like they're going to improve, thermals and clock speeds. I don't know how much. I mean, we've seen some pretty
no final
interesting
clocks yet. Yeah.
And the reason for that, I think, is they haven't really built out the SKUs yet, because they're still getting yield and bin data from what they're, getting back from the fabs. And they're probably going to start big production here shortly if they want to meet, the first, middle of 2019 release for all these products. But they're probably still getting a lot of data and still tweaking things at the foundry, working with foundry engineers. I mean, the design it's set in stone, but they can do more things at the foundry to improve a lot of these characteristics. And so, we're probably seeing that, and we won't know about the SKUs until probably Computex, I wouldn't I wouldn't doubt. I mean, there will be leaks, but yeah, I just thought that, you know, the people who were saying, oh yeah, they're going to announce all these SKUs and parts, and then we're going to get the feeds and speeds, and I just thought that just seems really early. We probably hear from a couple other different sources, and especially the motherboard guys, if they were ready to do that, and I don't think they are. So anyway, neat stuff.
Yeah, I mean the demo on stage, of course, they brought out Cinebench and the Zen 2 part versus the i9 9900K. So they wanted an 8-core 12 or 8-core 16-thread comparison, and the scores were very, very close. If you look over to non-text coverage, they apparently were pre-briefed and had their own benchmarks before the event. But the result, the Cinebench result was for the 9900K was 2040, and the Zen 2 on stage did 2057. So it beat it at whatever clock frequencies, which were not disclosed. But even so, it beat it at about 50 watts lower power draw with the test system at the wall. So 130-ish watts versus 180 from the Intel side. So at least in that benchmark, we saw an example of...
You know, a lot of people don't like it, but I think that it's a pretty solid benchmark. It's repeatable. It actually, you know, it's based on the Maxon products that actually utilize that code. So...
No, I'm in favor of Cinebench. I personally use it for just my go-to CPU testing because, like you said, it's not only is it repeatable, it's like exact. And at that point, you're basically just battling thermals as far as consistency of the test runs in that application. And it also allows you to go single or multi-threaded and customize the workload that way. So it's a very good benchmark for CPU. And obviously, AMD is very proud of their results with Cinebench. We've seen that a couple times now, but it's just showcasing the reduced power consumption. I know that we've talked about other process node drops and how that doesn't necessarily translate into, like with the RX 590, we didn't see a big decrease in power consumption, but they were focusing on increasing frequency.
Clock speed.
Yeah. So with Zen 2, apparently they have absolutely worked on total like power consumption is down, but we haven't seen clock speeds yet. So did they focus a lot on power? Did they focus on frequency? Did they try to do a little bit of both? So that's where I'm curious. I would love to see some of those leaked like 5 gigahertz on an 8-core part numbers that we saw from different rumors, but I
think we're going to see about a max of 4.7 to 4.8 boost, and just especially if they want to keep in the thermals that they're aiming at, because that IO chip is still 140. It's a 14 nanometer part, and it's still going to suck some power, and those chiplets are going to be really, really power efficient. But you know, when you've got one of those on there and an IO chip, and you're trying to boost things up to 5 gigahertz, 5.2 gigahertz, I mean, it's gonna. I mean, we don't know enough about TSMC 7 nanometer transistor technology in an actual product to be able to kind of figure out some basic hazy numbers and, you know, napkin math with where it's going to go in terms of clock speed and switching performance and wire speed and all those fun aspects of chips that people don't always think about. They just think about big numbers.
Yeah. Well, speaking of AMD, I just wanted to briefly mention, because it was in the news yesterday, The Street did a video interview with the CTO, Mark Papermaster at AMD, about just briefly touching on a couple of topics, including the Radeon graphics, where he just made it clear. They apparently felt the need to announce that they are indeed refreshing the graphics lineup across the board in 2019. And he said that they started at the high end. So he was speaking about the Radeon 7, and that he said, you'll see announcements over the course of the year as we refresh our entire Radeon roadmap. So I guess I expected a refresh anyway. What may be interpreted from this is maybe the refresh is going to be like Vega 2 derived instead of any kind of rebranding or we've already seen the process node allowing basically the RX 580 to be clocked up in the 590 product and offer better performance. So in this 2019 window, what do you think, like, as far as a full line product refresh, if they go 600 series, what's the likelihood that we're going to be getting more than the Vega 7 on Vega 2? You think maybe it's just a high end? It'd be like another, like maybe less HBM2 memory variant.
Josh, are you muted?
I believe Josh.
Yes, I was listening to Baby Shark.
While, no, stop.
No, I think the refresh is probably going to be the Navi parts, and they're going to be two smaller chips running on probably a combination of GDDR5 at the low end and maybe and GDDR6 at the mid range, and that's really the meat of the market. I mean, these $699 parts are. Not everybody spends that kind of money unless you're, a real competitive gamer, or you have parents that are rich, or, you have a really good job and you have as a hobby, or you mowed lawns all summer long just to afford this one card. Most people don't do that, and they're more willing to, get a $200 to $300 card because it's just more practical for a lot of people. And so I think Navi's going to really do a good job in addressing those areas. Maybe they'll release a higher clock variant of Radeon 7. I don't know. There may be some room there because it's still a very new 7 nanometer part that they're showing off, and it is going to be available February 7th.
Yeah,
that's a lot closer than a lot of people expected.
Yes.
And so that's going to be, 6 months after that, they could very well have a slightly boosted clock, Radeon 7 Ultra or whatever kind of branding that they want to.
Radeon 7 GTX.
Don't you love that? Anyway. Yeah. Well, so, I mean, they're going to have, top to bottom, essentially a refresh, but a lot of that's just going to be the Navi parts at 7 nanometer with, a decent memory technology that's not HBM.
Yes, indeed. Okay, let's talk mobile a little bit, and I just want to get this out there because I would say just about everywhere we went, there was RTX mobile on a laptop. Everybody has their new RTX mobile laptop to show. I believe MSI said they were going to be first to market with one, but they're all going to be out there very soon. And something like 40 plus models already announced, already out in booths for people to demo this week. And obviously expected. I mean, anytime a new graphics architecture comes out, we expect to see the mobile adoption. This feels, about right as far as the timing goes. And obviously the performance increases are there, generation to generation, considerable. In some cases. So
it seems though like this is the first time in a long time that, because they're releasing 2060, 2070, and 2080 mobile variants all together.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's the first time it's been coordinated like that. We've had the equivalent mobile parts from NVIDIA in the past where you get a higher end part and then a lower end comes in a few months later, or there's only 2 choices. Now you've got a full spectrum coming out effectively simultaneously, and apparently, I mean, the thing though is we don't have all the details yet on all of the performance capabilities of each part. So seeing how these stack up, seeing how these perform in real world applications. They had lots of demos. Here's your mobile video editing workstation, your mobile streaming station, your mobile gaming rig. But seeing how they all shape out and how the thermal envelopes of each design can accommodate them is going to be interesting.
Right, because of course they're doing Max Q, but then there's the large form factor gaming behemoths, of course. Yeah. The most exciting of which, and I didn't put it on the list, but I don't know if you saw the Alienware Area 51M. Mm-hmm. And don't mistake it for the desktop series. It's Area 51, the sort of triangular shaped desktops. This is a massive gaming laptop, and it I talked to Patrick about it on Twitch yesterday. It uses desktop processors, which are in just a regular socket, and you can take the bottom off and just drop in a different CPU if you want to, and has a very, very beefy looking thermal solution with heat pipes and slightly bigger profile fans and things because it has the space for it. But that is that's one implementation of RTX.
Yep.
You can go like basically desktop level. And
Holy crap, that reminds me, and this is aging myself. Back when the Pentium 2 was released, some notebook manufacturers were actually doing slotted Pentium 2s in a notebook form factor.
Jeez.
And a friend of mine was going to medical school, and several people of his classmates all bought some of these laptops that were surprisingly inexpensive at the time. I mean, they're like $3,500, but yeah, they had to like be propped up on these special legs because it needed so much air cooling around it. But anyway, sorry.
That brings back memories of the luggable computers, like before laptops were laptops.
Yeah, they're suitcase size.
Here's a 40-pound suitcase. Take it with you to your business meeting.
And Josh, look, just for you, I have in my hands
within arm's reach
slot 1 Pentium 2. This is a 233 megahertz version. I believe this is the first one. It's dated 12/15/97 from whoever sold this. And because it was within arm's reach, look, there's the slot A. So here we go. There's the slot era for you.
Okay, damn it. This isn't arm's reach, but it's 10 feet away.
All right.
Play the elevator music.
Yep. You'll have to add that in post. Oh, watch. We'll all watch Josh find something in his office. Oh, that was quick.
Yeah.
Oh, look at those pre-built boards. I see you have boards that are pre-populated for us.
There's the slot A.
What's that one running? What's the processor?
I think it's 700 megahertz.
It's on the top. Josh, it's on the top.
Well, it's dusty.
It's on the top of the processor. Feel it.
I'm getting
just with your
old,
fingertip.
man.
Use your fingertip and just feel the numbers.
Yeah, 700 megahertz.
Oh, it's a 700. Okay.
Yeah. And this one's a Pentium 3.
Oh. I mean, they were still doing slot 1.
Yeah.
For a while.
So anyway, they were within almost arm's reach.
Well, look, talking about notebooks, the notebooks that we can buy today again. Yes,
you can buy these today. Jim, you can buy these today. It's called ebay.com.
You can buy from retailer new.
Well, no. I mean, you don't get a warranty or anything, or,
Sure. But
even what you bought necessarily when the box comes.
But anyway, so looking at the opposite of that giant Alienware, you've got like the Razor Blade.
That's nice. I don't know if you saw that one, but the screen on that one is fantastic.
Oh, yes. Displays in general were a nice upgrade, got a nice upgrade across the board, desktop and laptop displays. I saw a lot of really good ones this year, but like the Razor Blade, some of the MSI notebooks, there were some really thin form factors, not Max Q, but they're still sporting 2060s in them. So, again, seeing how that's going to work out in real world applications, how bad the thermals will get, will be interesting to see.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about the 2060, just to kind of cap that story off, is one of the demos we saw was like an example streamer's gaming station where they had like their microphone, camera, and they had like kind of a simulated environment for them. But instead of having 2 dedicated PCs, one to actually play the game on one monitor and the other to actually do the video encoding for like the Twitch stream upload, they had a single 2060 running where they were offloading the video encode using OBS, like an upcoming version of OBS. At the same time, they were playing the game without that frame rate drop you get when your CPU starts chugging on OBS. If you ever tried to do that, which I actually have, you get to the point where you cannot play a modern game and stream on the same PC without significant frame drop issues or streaming issues. So that was interesting. And so a gaming laptop, suddenly that becomes like more interesting for the gamer on the go, especially if they like to stream as they play, because then you can kind of do it at the same time. You're not bogging down the CPU. So that was interesting. Yeah. But hey, Speaking of laptops, while we were at ASUS, which had a massive multi-suite display this year, one of the suites, and we'll talk about a remarkable display here shortly, but one of the suites had gaming. It was very gaming focused, some gaming monitors, tons of gaming laptops, desktops, that sort of thing. But interesting, in the first room, there's this Tough gaming series, and you've probably heard of the Tough branding from ASUS before. They had like it was like the Tough armor, where they had shielding over the motherboards and that sort of thing. They've sort of redefined what Tough is, and the Tough gaming is kind of their entry level now. They have Tough gaming laptops, the FX 505, the 705, that are totally AMD powered. So the new Ryzen 3000 series CPUs. And instead of going with the integrated Vega graphics, these have discrete RX graphics in them that kick in when you start playing a game. But I thought it was interesting. And I believe the price target that JJ mentioned was like $699 was the starting price.
Yeah. And they were nice laptops too. They did not look like your typical entry level gamer kind of, they were
pick up at Walmart.
Right. I mean, they weren't as thin as some of the high end ones, but they were relatively thin, felt sturdy. The displays looked good. The keyboard felt good. Nice trackpad. Didn't get a chance to check out the audio or, anything, but, it was surprising. You've got all AMD. So if you're Team Red, it's a great option for you.
Right. And even if you're not Team Red, like you said, they're nice laptops. You picked it up and looked at it, and it kind of looked like your typical $1,000 gaming laptop.
Yeah.
It has a full HD. It was like IPS-like technology. I'm guessing not LG, so not able to say IPS, but that type of display technology with great viewing angles, nice color, and the feel of them, like they had a nice rigidity to them. The keyboards felt good. Trackpad was fine. I was like messing around with the trackpad, and it just felt like something that you would expect to be more expensive, but there's the cost savings of maybe ASUS is passing on the savings of like a Ryzen 3000 series part. And then obviously the RX 560X graphics are not ultra high end, but this is a mainstream gaming laptop. And I just thought, hey, here's a great implementation of this stuff to give somebody a really nice product that has a little bit lower price point, but still feels premium, and then is just targeting kind of mainstream 1080p gaming.
Yep.
For $699. And while some people wouldn't pay $699 for a laptop, if you look at what's out there, you search gaming, and instantly, like everything you see on like Amazon or Newegg is like $900 and up. So it's cool to see something that's a little bit more budget friendly. Moving on. Oh, this was interesting. I won't go too crazy into this because I've probably already talked more than I should on Twitch. So if you want to hear about 10 more minutes of us talking about audio, Patrick and I went into great lengths discussing audio with the EVGA introduction. They got into sound cards. We had seen EVGA teasing something new on Twitter, and it was like this corner shot of something with like a lens flare behind it, and like this looks like a video card, maybe a cooler, I don't know. And then it's a sound card.
Yeah, when they invited us out and they said, we're going to unveil a new product category, and all I thought was, please don't be gaming chairs. Please don't be gaming chairs. And thank God.
Why? You didn't want to carry that home?
No.
Come on.
No. Thank God it wasn't gaming chairs, and not only wasn't it gaming chairs, it was something pretty cool.
I just thought of something, Jim, just to interrupt for a moment. The ultimate CES swag. Gaming chairs. Just collapse one down, strap it to your back, and then walk around with it for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Although I gotta say, after trekking around CES, my first CES, getting one of those little motorized scooters. If a company were to give me a little motorized scooter that I could get around in, that'd be pretty cool. I think I'd.
You know what? Not only that, but I hope the airlines aren't listening to our podcast, but. One of those scooters would give you preferential seating on the plane. You'd be one of those passengers who needs a little extra time.
No, I don't mean like the Rascal. I mean like the one you stand on. Like the kid,
go Rascal or go home.
No, you get the ones the kids use that fold up, but have a little bit of a motor in them, and you kick
like
around.
The one that Owen Wilson used in Zoolander.
Oh God, I don't remember.
You haven't seen that?
Haven't seen that movie in 12 years.
Was at the height of like the Razor scooter craze, and like tricks with his Razor scooter and like flipping around the base of it and stuff. And anyway,
You know what? Anybody could offer that would piss 90% of the people off at CES. Their own branded roller bag. That when you walk around the show with all of your stuff in the roller bag behind you, and cutting people off and smashing into ankles.
You know what? Didn't they put a stop to roller bags? Like the new security, like I think 2 or 3 years ago. I don't see any roller bags anymore.
Oh, wow. Well, that would be new to me.
I saw some,
but that's
I don't,
a smart thing.
Yeah, I don't remember if I saw them in the expo center or if it was just walking around between the casinos.
I feel like it's all just like shoulder bags and stuff now. Anyway, back to EVGA, back to sound cards. And this is, I love it. At the same time, I'm like worried that they're not going to get a lot of traction necessarily at this price. This is a premium product, so you look at it from 2 different sides. And there's another product we're going to be talking about shortly that's the same argument. It's from the audiophile side, it's a bargain. And for the consumer side, wow, this is really expensive. So it's $249.
Did we say the name?
It is the EVGA new sound or new audio. Sorry, new audio sound card. Yes, NU, new audio.
It's a discrete PCI Express sound card.
It's PCI Express, yes. Actually, technically, internally, it's a USB device that's bridged to PCI Express.
Oh, okay.
But it
doesn't do any like 3D processing. It's just pure audio.
It's pure 2-channel audio, and I was loving it. And I was talking to the founder, who was a big audiophile himself and has like a vintage system with like literal 1930s theater speakers in his listening room with an all tube setup, and it's just wonderful to talk to him and to learn about his interest in audio and how this is translated into a new product category for them. But this is there's a company called Audio Note in the UK, and they make high-end audio stuff where they're entry level, and if you read like audio file magazines and things, or you go to any of these websites that sell the products, you know that like a deal on an integrated amplifier from a lot of companies is like $2,000. And then you're going to be paying $2,000 to $4,000 for a pair of bookshelf speakers. But they had essentially an entry level system for them on display. And it was literally just being driven by a PC, just a built PC in an EVGA case, running all EVGA stuff, including the sound card. And the sound was phenomenal, of course. And it was like walking into a suite at like an audio show, the way that it was kind of set up. And when you sat in the sweet spot and like the nice stereo imaging and stuff, it reminds me of why positional audio, like the 3D DSP stuff, it makes such a huge difference when somebody enables it, because very often if you're using motherboard audio or a less expensive sound card, the sound is so narrow and flat in stereo that you pretty much have to enable some sort of spatial effect for it to sound really wide and really engaging. So this thing, and I did some headphone demos and listened to on the speakers, and it's really, really good. It sounds like a component. Like you'd almost expect there to be a dedicated DAC under the table, and it was just coming out of the back of the sound card. So, I mean, you can read the review, or not the review, the preview on the site, the little news post that I wrote up that shows some of the different pictures they have of like internal components and things, like the really fancy capacitors and power regulation and stuff. And it uses a high-end DAC. It's an AKM AK4493 and high-end op amps and all that good stuff. So if you're interested in like lossless music or just really, really high quality, and the numbers, like I wonder if these numbers are on their site somewhere, but they were showing those audio precision measurements that you'd see in like a stereophile magazine. They took of this thing on the output, and just crazy, like signal to noise ratio of over 120 with very, very low distortion, well beyond the audible spectrum, like minus 130 dB, virtually no intermodulation distortion, just incredible numbers for even a standalone DAC coming out of a sound card. So at that point, I'm thinking $250 is a bargain. But for the average customer, pricing out a build, this is a very, very high-end option.
It's focused.
Yes. So for somebody like me, they've found their market, but I'm weird. I admit it.
Yeah.
I face that.
And they mentioned too that this is an area, because this is such a passion for the founder and for lots of the people in the company. This is just the start of what they want to bring. They want to focus on audio. So this is something that is an introduction to a new area for them.
And they could very well, they could come out with a lower cost version. They could come out with a USB version. I mean, internally, this already is USB. So that I'm sure we'll see down the road. It's interesting. Like EVGA, they weren't like a pioneer in like the add-in board market, but when they came in, they started making compelling stuff. EVGA is one of those sort of go-to brands for graphics cards and motherboards and things. So it's interesting to see them get into sound. But moving on, Jim, you met with Rivet Networks, I believe.
Yeah.
The killer networking people.
Mm-hmm.
And they have, I know in the past, we've talked about kind of like obviously there's 10 gigabit, but then on copper, you can go to like 5, 2.5.
Yeah. So it depends on the controller that you're using. But there's 10, and then there's controllers that can negotiate at 2.5 and 5 as well as 10, and sometimes just to 2.5. And that's what we've got here. The Killer brand has been around since the early 2000s. It was initially an independent company that released a discrete card, network card that, had mixed reviews. Some people said it didn't do anything. Some people said it
had its own heatsink.
Yes. But the point was offload your network processing so that you can ensure that your computer's CPU is dedicated to the game. So you're not wasting any processing on your networking. And then that evolved.
And this made sense because this was, a time where CPUs were single core.
Yeah.
And dual core was just coming out in 2005, 2006.
Mm-hmm. And so they later on got acquired by Qualcomm, and they had some product releases with them, and they started to focus more on the software side. There's still hardware solutions, obviously, but more about software and doing like QoS, but gaming focused QoS, making sure that the priority is all for your game packets. And then, but they've been at Gigabit. They've been at Gigabit, and they've had wireless products as well. And their wireless products actually use Intel hardware now. So it's not the old days where it's like, oh, you have to choose between Intel and one of these others. It's, you get killer software with Intel hardware. But this new processor coming out, which is it's a wired NIC, wired Ethernet. I'm sorry, I'm being accosted by a cat here. Get out of there! Just go.
Leave, kitty.
God.
I feel like I'm missing out because I'm the only one who doesn't have a cat.
I will bring you
Kitty's
one.
being a dildo.
I've got a couple extras. I'll get you one.
I don't think they'd play nice with my dogs, but okay, maybe.
Yeah, they'll hold their own.
My son loves cats. We go to my mom's house and he can't get enough. But like this wouldn't work in my house, I don't think.
Well, anyway, so they've got this new line. They had the Killer E2500, which was the gigabit product. They've launched at CES the Killer E3000, and it's a 2.5 gigabit chip. And why 2.5? And the reason is, well, first of all, the price is basically the same as gigabit. Implementing this into motherboards and stuff, this isn't something you'd buy as a discrete add-on. You'd get it as part of your motherboard, and they're partnering with the company's laptops and motherboard manufacturers. Mm-hmm. And the pricing is about the same as gigabit. And the thing is, gigabit has been the bottleneck now for several years. It used to be when gigabit came into the market in the early 2000s and the enterprise and then moved into the home, it was the holy grail. It was amazing. Now it's the slowest interface in your computer probably compared to Thunderbolt and USB 3.
Well, even some wireless solutions are faster.
And yes, now we have wireless AX coming out, aka Wi-Fi 6, and that in many cases can negotiate real-world speeds higher than a gigabit. So
let's face it, 100 megabytes a second on your home network isn't really that sexy anymore.
Yeah,
and you're like, I can do the hard drive in my NAS can do more than this,
right? And so the thought was, well, 10 gig is coming. The prices are coming down on 10 gig. And we talked to companies like Quantia, and they've got solutions there. But for most people, it's still more than they want to spend. So 2.5 is a nice middle point where you're talking basically the same price to the manufacturer and therefore to the consumer. And you get more than double the speed. and it just works. It works with Cat, because the other aspect too is that 10 gig, you need Cat 6. It'll work on Cat 5 at very short distances with high quality cables, but you'd need to upgrade your cables to really ensure good 10 gig performance. At 2.5, it works with Cat 5e. So your existing cables work. Your devices, it'll auto negotiate down to a gigabit if you have legacy devices as well, so you don't have to worry about compatibility. And it makes sure that your connection is not the bottleneck. And they're not the only ones doing this. This is just one implementation. But the key is they're introducing it alongside their software suite, which has all kinds of stuff like it will detect when a game runs and will automatically disable Windows services that aren't essential. You can configure that, of course, to leave certain things running if you want, but it's basically going to run seamlessly in the background, automatically detect your game, automatically configure your system to ensure while you're playing that you get the best performance, that there's no processes kicking up, stealing CPU cycles, making sure that your game network traffic is high priority. And they're introducing something new this year too called Killer Intelligence Engine, which kind of has more consumer applications than just gamers, where it's because networking is hard for general consumers to understand. Why isn't it working? Why aren't my speeds fast? And what this is going to do is scan your network, try to determine your router, try to determine the signal strength and positions and all that, and detect what's wrong and suggest how to fix it. Like, you don't have this setting turned on, or your Wi-Fi router is just not powerful enough, and it'll tell you in plain language what the problem is. And if it can fix it itself, it will. And if it can't, it'll tell you, hey, here's the problem, fix it. So a lot of really unique stuff going on there that is accessible to consumers, not tied up in some obscure router or switch firmware. And so, we're going to have to get a chance to take a look and see how this works in practice. Notebooks with it will be shipping soon. And if you have if you're going to buy a notebook and you've got a choice between, say, an Intel Gigabit NIC or a Killer E3000, there's really no reason not to go with the Killer, or any other manufacturer that's going to be offering that higher speed. Don't let yourself be bottlenecked. And if you do game, it's the features probably are going to come in handy for you.
Go ahead, Josh.
Well, it's a nice alternative to the a Quantia 10G part that some motherboard guys are implementing, like the Taichi X470 Ultimate.
ASUS
that's got to have
some there too.
It's got some serious cooling on that chip.
Yeah.
So this is a nice, what do you call that when you trade two things off?
Compromise?
A trade-off?
Compromise.
Oh, compromise.
Yeah.
I know, I'm not familiar with that word.
Yeah. I can look at your audio stack, and yes, you do not compromise.
That's true. I haven't looked at network equipment in a few months personally. So are there switches
still not common
out there?
The switches are not common. I mean,
it's not common.
You can get 10G stuff, and it's pricey. You can get an 8-port switch for $500.
I think they've come down. Like, I was just looking at, I think either Netgear or somebody had one for like a couple $100 on Newegg.
Well, yeah, I mean, they originally were $1,500 to $2,000 for like 8 ports, and now they've gone down, under $1,000. But they're still not. I mean, I could do a quick search here, but they're not common.
The key though is a lot of manufacturers are rolling out this year, in the first half of this year, switches with the 2.5, because it is it's basically the same cost as gigabit. So they're going to be rolling those out. You have lots of options for switches where it's the whole switch. Let's say it's a 16-port switch or something. It's not every port is greater than gigabit, but you get one or two that are multi-gig.
Okay.
And then that's the point, is you plug in your high bandwidth devices into those, they can negotiate back and forth to the router at the faster speed, and then your legacy gigabit devices are just in the chain as well, running at their speed. So there are options. Plus routers themselves are coming out with, like we looked at the Nighthawk, I think it was late last year, that has a 10 gig, a multi-gig, so it can do 10, 5, and 2.5 built into it. So
it's going to get multi-gig into more devices, and so a lot of the 10 gig stuff is going to be backwards compatible, and then there's going to be stuff coming out. So more of a concurrent thing, where as this 3000 hits the market, then all of these 2.5 devices whether like networking devices, routers are going to be showing up at the same time.
That's the plan. And that's just, again, it's a price. It's a pricing thing. It's that because 10 gig's been around for several years now. It's that 2.5 in particular. The pricing has gotten almost to parity with gigabit, and that's what's causing this shift.
Interesting. So like the budget routers of 2019 with 2.5.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm looking on Amazon. I mean, they've got like a QNAP has a 8-port shared 10 gigabit for $589. ASUS has a 2-port 10G and 8-port gig E for $250. So yeah, it's getting down there, but it's not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what is there yet?
What is there?
ASUS has astonished us with a 32-inch monitor. This is their ProArt PA32UCX. It's a 4K HDR monitor, and okay, I know with 4K HDR, it's everywhere. And even monitors with full array local dimming to meet that spec, like the HDR 1000 has much tighter requirements for like low black levels, contrast ratio, overall brightness, all that sort of thing. This monitor has 1,000 individual lighting zones behind the panel.
That's
and it's 32 inches. I haven't done the math. That's a lot of those little micro LEDs.
That's a lot of local dimming.
Yeah, it's a lot of local dimming per square inch. And it's like two benefits to this at the same time. You have tiny LED lights behind the display. And the first example I could think of was, if you remember, I think it was 2 years ago, Sony introduced the Z9 TV. And the Z9, maybe it was 3 years ago now, it was a TV with just an astonishing number of local dimming zones that was essentially simultaneously producing a high-resolution image on the LCD and a lower resolution image of the same thing behind it using a micro LED panel. And so it was following along with the action and creating an incredible effect of just lighting exactly where it needed to light, instead of, TVs that have 100 zones even, or 200 zones, where you have bigger squares behind the screen on like a 65 or 75 inch TV. And we were impressed just a year or two ago by TVs that had a couple hundred zones, and this thing just takes it all the way up to 1,000, which is crazy. I mean, we saw one monitor that was 512, which was so far and above the 384 that we'd seen before with a gaming monitor, and then to walk into the next room and see this 1,000 zone, it's hard to describe what it actually looks like in person, because it has the capability of peak brightness that is so high, but at the same time controlling black levels perfectly. And it doesn't have the same look as OLED. I have an OLED TV. It's a couple years old, and it's a different look than an emissive display. There's just something about that. And I will admit, like, LCDs do gradation better. Like they do gray better. Like as you go down in brightness, there is so much greater control to an LCD panel like this, where you see like the smooth transition from black to gray and other colors, where with OLED you get to a certain threshold where it pretty much just has to shut off. It can't do the really dark grays as well. But anyway,
Can you imagine the controller required to do all of that work?
I mean,
and the amount of tuning that has to be done in software to get it all to work together seamlessly.
Because obviously a lot of engineering went into this, I'm sure. It's probably going to affect the final price, which they were not displaying. And I can imagine, since it's is marketed as a professional's monitor, like this is a monitor for people creating HDR content, that sort of thing, it's not going to be inexpensive. But I mean, I don't really care what goes into it. I just want it. I want one of these monitors. I want 1,000 zone backlights.
The sound that you made when we walked into that room and stood in front of this display is we'd have to mark this as not safe for work or explicit on iTunes if I were to recreate.
Oh,
it was it was more sensual than that, Josh. It was more like
it was more animalistic, I guess.
Yeah.
When I told JJ I could stand here and just look at this monitor for the next half hour, and he kind of chuckled, like I wasn't joking. I needed some time. I wasn't ready to leave just yet.
It was pretty good.
One of the things that I love this trend of not worrying about making stuff like razor thin and getting back into rear lighting, like backlighting behind the screen instead of edge lighting. Edge lighting, it doesn't matter how nicely it's implemented, you're going to have some uniformity issues from panel to panel, and there's hot corners to deal with, whichever side has the more intense lighting zone. And like some of the newer Samsung TVs of the last couple of years, they've only had lighting along the bottom shining up, and then you have like hot like zones on the bottom, and it's just, there's a reason that when I was shopping for a television, I ended up getting myself banned from Best Buy. Because
you just kept returning everything.
Yes. Yeah. Because nothing was good enough. Like there's a hot corner, there's another hot corner, and then this top, and I finally just I got banned. But so I stuck with what my last purchase. I had no choice but to keep it. But I'm never happy, and I was actually happy with this display. So it was fun to see. And even though I will never buy one because I'm afraid it's going to be like $6,000 or $7,000.
I would bet it's $4,500 to $5,000.
Okay,
I think that
changes everything.
The marketing team at Josh Tech has swayed me.
Yeah.
One of the things that I got to see at Digital Experience, and for people who don't know, like CES, one of the nights before the official show starts, there's a very, very densely packed ballroom with booths galore and some pretty tasty snacks as well. But HyperX was there, and I tried these on there. And then, Jim, you got some quality time with HyperX yourself after I, sneaked out early and got on a plane. But what were your impressions of the HyperX accessories? We saw microphones and headsets. There are a couple different models of this Cloud Orbit series.
Yeah. So I got a chance to go up to their suite where they were demoing everything, and the headset that they're announcing is interesting because it's, as you alluded to, sort of with the EVGA new audio card. This is something that's going to touch both the audiophile and gamer markets. It's a gamer headset, so it's got the microphone and the features and the software for gaming stuff, but it's built with Audeze planar magnetic drivers. 100 millimeter Audeze. Is it Audeze? Is that the pronunciation?
I've heard Audeze. I've heard Odyssey. I've heard Audeze.
Yeah.
I think the company themselves said Odyssey.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% sure.
They're a high-end audiophile grade headphone manufacturer, and so they're working with HyperX on this, and they're using their drivers. And so it's planar magnetic technology, and it sounds really good in standard stereo mode. But that's the HyperX Cloud Orbit. They also have a Cloud Orbit S, which is using technology from a company called Waves NX that uses head tracking to statically place audio sources or outputs in a fixed position. So the point here is you are listening to a multi-channel audio track or even a stereo track. You're listening to a track that has channels, and you center your head and push a button, and then using head tracking, it places those channels in fixed positions around you, and it's using its processing to simulate that surround effect. And once that button is pushed and those channels are placed, as you move, it's not positional, so if you walk across the room, it doesn't work, but just turning your head, it keeps the channel relatively placed where it is to your head, so it sounds as if you were literally turning your head in a room with discrete speakers. And it's kind of weird. It's really effective. Like, it sounded really incredible. I had a stereo audio track, so it sounded like there were two stereo speakers in front of me, and then I demoed a game that had a multi-channel audio track, and it sounded like a surround sound. And it kind of creates a more realistic experience. It was hard. The showroom was a little noisy, so it was really hard to get a good experience or good demo of it. But it gives you this sort of feeling like you're not really with headphones, like you are truly sitting in a room with a discrete multi-channel audio setup around you with speakers.
It's actually, it's even more positional than that. That's the kind of weird thing. And the brief demo I had of it, like in a room, there's enough like reflected sound that it's never as positional. Like you have to be in a very specific spot to get that level of directionality from speakers. Like near field monitors can do it, but that it was kind of eerie because once they centered my head and hit the button and I started turning my head around, I was losing the sound. Like the sound that was right in front of me became well off of my left and my right ears as I moved around. And it's interesting. Like it worked better than I was expecting it to. Like this is essentially software working with hardware. They're like accelerometers in the headset.
Yeah.
That are measuring motion the same way that your phone would.
Yep.
And
it's a millisecond polling rate, so it's very responsive.
Yes. It was very quick. Yeah. As soon as I turned my head, I could hear this. I was leaving the sound behind.
Yeah.
So it was, I don't know. It's like taking the sort of simulated surround from headphones kind of to another level, but at the same time, I wonder what the practical application of it is.
Right. Like as a technology, it's working. The point is like, does this bring anything that someone would actually use beyond just trying it out the first time? So like I said, we both demoed it in noisy environments. I'd like to get it home, and they said they're going to try to set us up with some review units so we can try it.
And what's interesting too, and I'll add as a footnote, is the Cloud Orbit is actually a different product from the Cloud Orbit S. The S is the one that has this technology. And if you're interested in the technology and whatever applications it might have as far as games and that sort of thing, it's only $30. Like you're talking about a $30 difference in the MSRP between the one with and the one without.
Yeah, the one without is $299. The one with is $329.
And before you say that is outrageous, that's $300 for a gaming headset, understand that this is the same driver that's in the Odyssey Mobius headphone, which is a 100 millimeter planar magnetic driver, and that is a $399 pair of headphones. So HyperX teaming up with them, they're using the same drivers. It's a little bit different, packaging. It's the HyperX headset, but it's still a premium headset. And I will say, like HyperX, the last couple of headsets I've had in from them, these are really nice. They're getting better and better, and even with their conventional drivers, flatter, better musical production, solid bass response, but not overpowering, like very good just for music, 2-channel music listening. And then to move up to these drivers, it's kind of like getting a discount on the Mobius when you get this. So it's like, okay, well, you can get into these Odyssey planar magnetic headphones for $100 less than you can with Odyssey, and it's packaged as a gaming headset, and you get a microphone, and you can use it with your computer, and you can hook it up two different ways. There's like a USB connection. There's a 3.5 millimeter connection. So
Odyssey gets to sell the headphones essentially, but not have to support them.
Hey, yeah, there you go.
Win-win. Cool.
Yep. And then real quick, the other they had a couple of announcements, but the other key one here is the HyperX QuadCast microphone. This is their first dedicated desktop, or not, it's not a built-in microphone. It's a USB mic built for streamers. It's got a unique design. It's got 4 polar.
It's red.
It is, and I asked about that too. Unfortunately, that's not RGB. It's just red. So Gen 2 will be RGB. Gen 2 you can choose the color. But it's a red and black design. It's pretty slick for what it is. It's got a nice shock mount that comes with it. Selectable polar
Which
patterns.
Is nice. Yeah, especially for the price point to include the shock mount.
Yep. And
kind of goes against like the blue microphones of the same price range.
Yeah, the price range on this is $139, launching in the second quarter. It's got a 3.5 millimeter output for live monitoring, so you can check your levels and also output sound through your computer, so you can have all the audio coming through there if you want.
Yeah.
Nice microphone. It's got a touch to mute on the top, and it indicates mute status by turning the light off. So it's real easy to see whether the microphone is on or not.
I kind of get the red at that point thing. It's like the on-air light.
Yeah.
Like your microphone on your desk is your on-air light. Like it's red. We're broadcasting right now. So that's kind of cool. And then did you mention the different patterns you can actually select for different?
It's got Omni. It's got bidirectional. I can't remember all of them, but basically it's whether you can do straight in front, all around, side to side, and one other. I don't remember, but choices for how you're using it, whether you want it to be directional or not.
So, yeah, I mean, plus it looks cool on a desk.
Yeah, it's a nice look. It's got a nice sturdy stand. It's a real hefty kind of weight to it. It's
I didn't get a chance to like grab it. I saw it there and I was like instantly went for the headphones, so I didn't even play with it at all. So
good heft to it. So
yeah, we didn't Josh, there's so many cues here, and you're just missing all of them.
I can't do it. Big old.
We're talking about
microphone.
hefts. We're talking about grasping things that are girthy.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
All right.
I'm looking at my mono price, and I'm pretty happy with it. It doesn't have any RGBs, and what can you do?
I guess
Nothing.
Just carry on.
I sound terrible no matter what I'm on. So.
I think you sound delightful, Josh.
Well, thank you. Shall we move on to the Phison stuff?
Let's talk about Phison. And this is cool. It was actually legit reviews who had good photos. I was reading about this on Computer Base when I wrote up this news post this morning, but this is the PS5016-E16, which I hope is not a final product name for anything, but it is a brand new controller, part of a prototype device they were showing at CES. And the story is this is PCI Gen 4 NVMe. And even with this early device and the way they had to connect it, obviously there's no PCI Gen 4 desktop yet. And the desktop system they had was a conventional motherboards. They were using this development platform type thing. It was, what is this, Gen 4 host add-in card from PLDA. So it uses PCI 3 by 16 upstream to PCIe 4 by 8 downstream. So it converts it down. And the results they were showing with just Crystal Disk Mark were well over their stated 4 gigabyte per second reads and 4100 writes. Just tremendous speeds. Obviously not double the speed of Gen 3 or anything, but even this early prototype is getting well over 4,000.
Yeah, so Phison is a company that they impressed with one of their first generation products that it wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. And so, my digital SSD took it, a bunch of other guys did, and they tuned the firmware and it was a solid controller. And then you had their second generation one with the BPX Pro, which was 3.4 gigabytes per second reads and 3.1 gigs writes when you have all 8 channels with fast 3D NAND in there. And we can see that with this design, they've obviously improved some clocks and throughput and whatnot, that they're achieving over 4 gigabyte per second. So that's a nice little jump, and for what is probably going to be not exactly a budget part, but it's not like Samsung 970 Pro.
Right, yeah, their
prices.
Pedigree has been the good mainstream solution. They're not, like you said, it's not budget. It's not it's low performing, but it's affordable stuff that's actually very solid. This is, like you mentioned, 8 channels. This is an 8-channel controller. This has kind of a custom solution. It's a quad core that uses 2 ARM cores and then 2 of their own proprietary processor cores. So very interesting to see. And it just one of the things I thought of instantly when I thought about PCI Express 4 is storage. Because maybe you don't need that for graphics right now, or for the
that's what all the server people are waiting for, is PCIe 4.0 to address all of the storage issues that they have, because that's constantly a bottleneck. I mean, they've got all these SSD drives attached to a backplane that in theory could be many gigabytes per second, but you're limited with your controllers. And so the big iron guys who really need that kind of throughput, they're chomping at the bit for PCIe 4.0.
Yes, and so am I. But let's move on. We visited with Be Quiet while we were at CES. We went up to their suite, and Be Quiet, if you're not really familiar with them, they are a German company. They're the number 1 brand over there. They make cases, they make coolers, they make power supplies, and they are very, very black. Everything is black, and it's very sleek looking, very high end, very German. But right off the bat, we walk into the suite, and they've got a very white case on display. So we saw the dark base 700 white edition, which is a limited edition, and this is limited to 3,000 units. It's more of a kind of a landmark of, it was celebrating their history, but also kind of what they could do with white. And they were very proud of this, and for good reason, because like they were saying, it's not easy to do white with different materials. They're doing plastic and metal and exactly matching the shade of white between the two of them, which if you ask Apple is not easy to do. If you remember back to the first white iPhones and all the problems there, but they did it. And then they showed it all off with a pure, like a clear tempered glass side panel, which looks very fresh. Like a lot of cases always have like there's a tinted kind of look to most tempered glass. It was very, very refreshing looking, and they had some what I would describe as tasteful RGB lighting.
Yes, which was a rarity this week.
Yes, actually, yeah. Tasteful, you mean, not RGB?
Yes, tasteful RGB was the rarity or the.
Yeah, I was going to say, because RGB is everywhere, but this was just very, 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 and I think it was surprising anyway. If you follow like enclosures and stuff, and for I've been living in that world for the last 5 years. But to see Be Quiet with RGB was surprising enough, and then to see a white case was interesting. But they didn't have just a case to show, and that is an interesting case. I will just mention one more thing about it before I move on, is that it is and you can get the black version too, but that case design is modular. You can make it inverted if you want to. You can flip it around. You can put the rear side panel on the front side panel on the rear, and you can do a lot with the case. So it was interesting. But they also had some different coolers and fans on display, and you can look at the article on the website. But the interesting thing, besides white fans that are pure white, like all white plastic to go with your white cases, is the Dark Rock Slim cooler, which is their answer to anybody who has they want the efficiency of a powerful air cooling solution, the simplicity of air over liquid, but do not want to deal with memory compatibility problems and that fan overhang you get with the really big coolers. So this is a cooler that can still do, I believe it's 180 watts.
Was
TDP.
It 180 or 160?
I want to say, let me pull it up here. I want to say it was higher. As I pull it up, but it's a very slim cooler given its heat dissipation capabilities. So it is an interesting option, and you can check out the site for the pictures that we took and the little there's a video of us talking to Be Quiet as well. But let's see. Actually, I think that pretty much wraps up news.
There's one other
Jim,
thing.
What?
One other thing.
Josh. Yes.
NVIDIA and FreeSync.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah. How could I leave that off?
I don't know.
Okay, go ahead, Josh.
Okay, so you know what? I think the G-Sync tax is real. And I believe that it has had a negative effect on the amount of monitors that have been sold under that brand. And I think AMD, even though they aren't selling a whole huge amount of cards, there are so many FreeSync monitors out there, and they're kind of ubiquitous. Is that the correct usage? But I mean, they're just everywhere, and they're at all kinds of price points, and they're at really good price points as compared to G-Sync. And I think that finally, NVIDIA realizes, we have developed a lot of time, a lot of software, a lot of money in getting G-Sync, and we just don't sell much stuff because the prices, until recently have kind of been nuts. And I think that this is a great move by them. It'll make their cards a lot more attractive because people can now pair an inexpensive FreeSync monitor with an NVIDIA card. And this is fantastic for consumers. And it's something that I think NVIDIA has lost sight of. I mean, sure, having G-Sync was good. It was a product and a philosophy that they developed really well. And you could argue that they did it the right way. They did it their way. That it had a very controlled environment, and the results are very good. I mean, very consistent with monitor to monitor. You're not going to have really a bad G-Sync monitor. You're going to have a bad panel, like a TN panel can be crappy, but your experience on that panel is going to be G-Sync, and it's going to be good because it uses that G-Sync module. It's incredibly low input latency, I mean, the best really in the business, and all the stuff that they actually do to each image and how they control that, it just works. It's fantastic, and there are real good reasons to get a G-Sync monitor if you've got an NVIDIA card, if you want the best experience. However, you can get 90% of that best experience with FreeSync, and they finally are supporting that. Only 12 monitors. Many of those are like last generation.
Yeah. Well,
maybe not, discontinued as well, but they're starting that up. And not only that, but on the 15th, apparently there's a way that you can kind of override the G-Sync compatible and just use any kind of FreeSync async monitor and see how your results are. Some of your results may be bad and you'll want to turn that off, but you may have the option.
It definitely depends on the actual monitor. It's case by case, and there's a reason that they've only, because you're talking about the G-Sync compatible. It's not really like a certification program, but it's just something that they've been doing. They've been testing. And they've released this list as 12 monitors so far out of 400 plus that they've tested. And we got to see some of the other monitors and kind of side by side. And obviously this was at NVIDIA, so it's in their interest to show the fruit of their efforts, I guess you could say, as far as what their G-Sync compatible stuff is. But it's taking monitors you can just go out and buy that, like you said, some of these have been on the market for a little while. Put them through different tests and things. Part of it is the range, the actual variable refresh range. And we've seen a ton of monitors that are FreeSync that have a extremely limited range.
Like 45 to 60?
Yeah. So they're looking for a bigger ratio with the range, so you can go down a little bit farther. They're looking for color. They're looking for like the actual the panel performance. Like just various things and giving them the certification. But like you said, it's nice to see that without any kind of driver hack or anything, you can use a FreeSync monitor, a variable refresh monitor that's on the market without having to buy the G-Sync monitor. And I'm not in the camp that thinks that G-Sync is like a myth, like it's just a marketing term, because obviously there's more to it. There's a reason there's hardware. There's a reason
that's a serious FPGA that powers the G-Sync.
Yeah. I mean,
and there's a huge software component behind it.
I would love it if every monitor came out and could just go down to like 1 hertz and all the way up to like 144, but they just don't. And there's a lot that goes into the timing of a panel. Like you can't just take a monitor that essentially is a 60 hertz monitor that can go down to like 48. And we've seen this a lot with TVs, like going back to a T-Con that might exist for a panel that is like a traditional 60 hertz panel that has like a film mode, like a television that can go down to 48 because, a movie is shot at 24 frames a second. So to have an actual proper 24 FPS or 24 hertz experience, you have to have a monitor that's like 48 capable, because then it does frame doubling to get it up to 48.
3.2 pull down sucks.
Yeah, 3.2 pull down sucks. So that was one of those things when I was shopping for TVs over the last few years. You always look for a TV that can natively go down to 48. And these are LCD TVs. But the solution there was when the 128 hertz or the 120 hertz TVs came out, you're just repeating each of the 24 frames 5 times to get to 120, if I'm doing my math right.
Yeah,
multiple.
You're correct. Yeah, because 120 is one of those magic numbers when it comes to video.
Now,
24, 30, 60.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just say, well, the way to make my game smoother is just to increase its frame rate. I'll just increase the performance of the game, and then it will always be smooth. But that's the problem, especially once you go up to higher resolutions. You need, if you have a monitor that can match the output of your graphics card, then you get a smooth experience, and you don't have tearing, and you don't have the other issues.
But now we're getting into the philosophy of that. But anyway, it's nice that we have the option now.
Sorry, I think we should clarify. with this program. This is not something that NVIDIA is working with display manufacturers to certify, as you alluded to, Sebastian. How they described this to us, and talking to display manufacturers at the show too, they concurred that they didn't know this was happening. NVIDIA went out and bought these displays, these FreeSync or adaptive sync displays, did their own internal testing, which they have not revealed the methodology of, and then approved them or not. And as you said, that they claim to have tested 400. They said only 12 of those 400 that they tested meet the compatible qualification as of today. And if you have one of those and you plug it into your NVIDIA card, just like when you enable G-Sync through the control panel now with a G-Sync monitor, it'll say G-Sync compatible detected, and it'll turn it on automatically. And then if you don't have one that's qualified, you can override it and then see how it works and judge for yourself whether you want to keep it enabled. But and maybe they'll get there, but as of now, they're not working with the manufacturers. Speaking to many manufacturers, I don't necessarily want to name, but I think I talked to 4 or 5 of them. They didn't know what the qualifications were. They didn't know what the process was. They weren't getting any answers. So as of right now, this is something NVIDIA is doing internally and then sharing out to their customers. And hopefully, if they don't go to an official relationship with the manufacturers, it will at least drive them on their own to increase quality to meet what appears to be the requirements, so that their products can then be marketed to customers using both GPU types.
Yeah, this is, kind of the issue that FreeSync originally had, is there's a huge swath of quality issues that a lot of, even their FreeSync branded monitors, they're pretty crappy. And FreeSync 2 kind of tightened a bunch of things down. So I think this will also improve what we have going on, which is awesome.
Well, we could go on and on about CES and our feelings about CES endlessly. Do either of you have any kind of closing? I know it's kind of passe, but like final thoughts, favorite
on a Friday,
favorite moments.
My legs hurt. My legs hurt so bad.
You know what? Shin splints are real, Jim.
Yeah, no, I think the biggest surprise was the G-Sync compatible and giving consumers the option to turn on that functionality if you've got a FreeSync monitor. That was just
bigger than Vegas 7, bigger than okay.
Well, it was the most unexpected and something that will probably affect the most people in the short term.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's see. Do we want to do picks of the week? Do you have something to share, Josh, Jim?
I do.
Okay.
Who's first?
You go, Josh.
Go.
Okay, so this one is the, I've talked about the Dell Alienware version. This is the 34-inch Acer Predator Gaming X34 PBMIPHZX.
Don't you love the naming?
Oh, I know. That it's a G-Sync monitor. It's got the G-Sync in there. You got to do DisplayPort to be able to get it up to 120 hertz, which is a magic number. I've got that same panel in this Alienware in front of me. It's for $750, and that's just dirt cheap getting to be for the quality of monitor, the speed, the build, G-Sync compatibility. Not compatibility, but it's a G-Sync monitor. And
is this like an ultra wide or is it like a conventional?
Yeah, it's the 21:9.
Okay,
ultra wide, or whatever they call it now.
You know what?
Ultra wide.
Racing games look really nice on those ultra wide.
They do. And 120 hertz is nice, and G-Sync is nice. Everything is nice about these. And yeah, the panels are good. These are well reviewed. The design is nice and industrial, and it looks pretty. So yeah, if you really want a G-Sync widescreen, 34-inch, 1440, 3440 by 1440, it's I've been enjoying mine immensely.
Almost too much, it sounds like.
Almost.
All right. Your hands are not where I can see them, Josh. Oh, okay. All right. Jim.
Most of that content doesn't, come out in 2009. So.
All All right, Jim, what do you have a pick for us?
Yeah, so this is may not apply to everybody. It's if you've got a MacBook Pro or MacBook, I guess, because like a lot of people are Ken, who obviously was with us, used to work here, and I, we have desktop PCs, we have MacBooks as well. And
wait a minute. So we got rid of Ken, and then the new guy comes in, and he's got a MacBook too.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah. Sorry.
All right.
There's dozens of us. But if you have a MacBook, this is a device called the dock case adapter, and it snaps onto your MacBook power supply and has a pass-through for the power. It's not a pass-through. It's taking the USB-C power and it's splitting it into a dock that's right there. So you get the power out to go back to the MacBook, and then you've got some ports on it, and they have various models that offer different capabilities. Some are USB 3.0 and HDMI if you need video. Some are USB 3.0 and then high power charging for a USB charging port. I had the one with the USB charging, and just traveling in Vegas this week, it's super handy because you've got to have your power or your adapter anyway to keep the MacBook powered up, and you might as well have a dock built into it so you don't have to carry something else. So it's all together in one piece. Plug it in, connect all your devices. You can charge. You can use it as a dock to get USB Type A ports into your MacBook. So something to check out there. They start at like $50, gonna go up to I think 75, based on the size of the adapter and the port selection. So if you've got one and you travel, it's a way to consolidate things, to consolidate your MacBook charging as well as a dock built in.
As well as your dongle collection. That is absolutely essential if you're a MacBook user.
Yep.
But you know what, Jim, have you ever considered cargo pants? Like just pants that offer more pockets for all your dongles.
I did. Yes, I did. And then some asshole told me that I shouldn't wear those.
I wonder who that would be. All right. So my pick of the week is absolutely nothing practical or modern. It's kind of a theme with me, but this is Star Trek Phase 2. If you can see it on the camera, this book, this is by Judith and Garfield Reese-Stevens. Yeah. I mean, the book isn't from 1976, but...
No. But the concept of Star Trek Phase 2 was...
Yeah. It's pretty fascinating stuff. Like, not only is there, like, the whole story of, like, how they were going to bring Star Trek back to TV in the 70s. Like, not even that long after it was canceled, then the animated series came to TV, and then that was, it was like legitimate writing. The original voice cast was there, and they said, you know what, why don't we bring this back to TV? So they started right away in the mid 70s, and it's an interesting story. Just like if you're interested in like the nuts and bolts of how, like, what goes into the making of a TV series, what goes into like what's in the minds of like the executives at a movie studio, because this went back and forth between whether it was going to be a film or whether it was going to be a TV series, and then it was going to be a TV movie, and then it ended up, years later, becoming like the pilot episode for this series ended up being rewritten and made into Star Trek: The Motion Picture. But the episodes that were completely written and the scripts are in this book were used for Star Trek: The Next Generation too. So if you're a Star Trek fan like me, it's just fascinating reading. And this is one of those things where you have to get the book, because I don't believe there's an audiobook version of it. And I think the book is out of print. So I bought a used copy on Amazon. There's still other used copies available, but if you are interested at all in either just the history of TV or in Star Trek, then I found it fascinating.
And it's poignant because we've just learned earlier this month that the fourth Star Trek movie the fourth of the new series has been canned, apparently.
Yeah, they went through different directors, and then eventually, like, Chris Pine said that he was out, and if you don't have Kirk, then it would be weird to recast the captain, and then, unfortunately, the actor who played Chekhov met an early end.
Anton Yelchin, yeah.
So, I mean, I almost wondered then if they weren't going to be doing a fourth, but hey, we got 3. Hey, plus there's a new Picard series coming, right? Yeah. I keep on seeing news in my feed.
It sounds like they're going to destroy that just like they did Discovery. So
yeah, probably. Anyway, definitely check out PCPro.com for our CES coverage and for the reviews that we talked about, like the RTX 2060, new peripherals from Corsair. Lots of more stuff coming. Like CES may be over, or pretty much over at this point, but there's a lot left.
Yeah, we got a monitor review coming up, and also some pieces of ARM news that are kind of interesting. So
hey,
we'll hopefully have that in next week.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff coming. A lot of stuff I'm still working on. Plus, I need to do my part 2 of the 2060 review. Get the 1440 results, do overclocking, check out whenever DLSS becomes available, that'll be updated too. So the Port Royal benchmark came out while we were at CES. So that needs to be put through its paces. So anyway.
And just because you don't have enough to do already, you've got some third-party 2060s coming your way too. So.
Oh boy. Yeah. I guess when I overclock, I can do a little group. All right. Well, for all of us at PC Per, thank you. And I guess we can go around the horn. I'm Sebastian Peak.
We don't have to, but I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Jim Tanis, and my legs still hurt.
Yeah. I mean, it's a transition period for us. I still don't know how to end the show. So thank you for watching.
Good night.
There you go.
Bye.
All right.